how important is it that as a leader, we are being transparent with the process, with the employee? So for example, if we go back in time to your story, having your manager say, look, Jeff, if you hang out over here in this role for a year, that will round out your skill set, and then let's come back and talk, and then you'll be ready for a promotion. Kind of, putting some kind of a process to it or timeline to it. And then, of course, naturally sticking to it. We've all heard the stories. I've had clients that have said, oh yeah, my leader promised me a promotion last year, and then now they promised it this year, and they just keep pushing out the timeline, and then that just also deteriorates the integrity of the process. But I'm just curious, from your vantage point, how transparent, because sometimes it's hard to be transparent in those situations. So I'm curious what your thoughts are around that.
I think it's risky to put a timeline, first of all.
Okay.
Because
great point.
If you say, hey, next year, well, a lot of things can happen between now and next year that may make, there may not even be a promotion to be offering. So I think it has to be more of a, when the time comes, here's the kinds of things that we're going to be looking for. And so here's where you're strong and here's where you can improve. And best of all, if you're doing that and you think the person is sincere about wanting to grow into the role, you add to it. And since these are the things I just identified, here's a couple of things I can do to help you gain some of those skills. Because then now you're part of the process and you're saying, not only I want you to get promoted, but I'm going to help you get promoted as long as you do your part as well. And then that gives you chances along the way to give feedback about how the person is doing. Like I was put into an informal leadership role in the example we had. And if my other boss had said, hey, how's it going over there? What have you been doing? I noticed that you've done X and Y and Z. That's really good. But I have noticed that you haven't done A and B and C. You might want to work on those things. That gives me a chance to assess where I am in terms of, am I promotable or not? And so when the time comes, if I don't get promoted, I don't have to hear afterwards, here's where you fell short. I'll know along the way, yeah, there were some places where I was still weak. And that makes sense to me. So I think that promising a promotion is really risky. Talking about the skills that people need to gain to get there is always really good. But if you've only reserved that for those moments when they either did or did not get promoted, then you missed a chance to develop people along the way. And you also missed a chance to maybe soften the impact of not getting promoted because they will understand why before they come in and talk to you.
That's great. So last point, because we could actually sit on just this topic alone for our entire show. It's such a rich topic.
Yeah, because I've been not promoted a ton of times.
Final question on this. So who owns the responsibility of that conversation? Is it the manager to start it and say, hey, Jeff, would love to talk to you about this? Or is it the employee that says, hey, I've been hanging out over here in the satellite office working on this stuff. Just want to give you an update and get your feedback. Both those are, important conversations. So I'd be curious your thoughts on that.
If you want to be lazy, if you're the manager and you want to be lazy, you can say that it's the employee's job. But there you have a lot of folks who have ambition, who would like to get promoted, but it's an embarrassing conversation to go in. If I had been only a year on the job in a place where there were people with 10, 15, 20 years experience, for me to walk in an office and say, I'd really like to be a supervisor someday, what do I need to work on? It's presumptuous, it's kind of embarrassing. It implies that you think you're maybe better or farther along than you should be. It's just that's a tough place to go sometimes. And usually by the time the person will come to you and talk about it, they're probably a little disgruntled, a little defeated. They feel like things haven't gone well. So if you take the other approach and just say, my job as a leader, my happiness as a leader should come from seeing the people around me succeed. If you look at it that way, then it's very easy to go to somebody and say, what are your goals? What are you looking to do? What do you want to be inside this organization or out? Are there ways that I can help you accomplish that? That way their goals become your goals and vice versa. And then you can manage those conversations along the way. I don't know that there's any better time as a leader spent on anything other than saying to people, I care about you. I want to see you achieve whatever goals you have. If there's ways I can help you, let's do that and let's work on it. And I'll give you feedback along the way. I also hate annual reviews because I think if anything is a surprise in an annual review, then that's the leader's fault, basically. So my annual review it should be really boring because I ought to know everything you're going to tell me. So you can take the same approach with promotions. If you have to tell me after a promotion why I didn't get it, well, I should have known that along the way because we should have been talking about my performance along the way.
Yeah,
I know I went around the barn with that, but
no, I think that's beautiful.
The short answer is it's a leader's job because not everybody will come to you, but everybody deserves to have the conversation.
Yeah. I love how you set that up. It's a sign of respect. It shows you care. It takes some of the edge off the conversation because the employee's not coming with kind of a resentfulness to it. And you're right, it shouldn't be part of the performance review process. There's a faculty member out in Stanford named Bob Sutton. He's written several books, and he's got, you probably know Bob, and he's got this great saying around performance reviews. He says, if performance reviews were a drug, they would not be FDA approved. Because research shows 50% of the time performance goes up after a review, and 50% of the time performance goes down. So
I think there's also studies that show that if people have to come to you and talk about a raise, that even if they get the raise, that it's still a negative because they had to ask.
Yeah.
You think that, and they had to prove somehow that they were worthy of that, when as a leader, it's your job to know. If you came to me and said, here's the 8 things I've done, I think I deserve more money, and I go, yeah, you're right, let's do that. Well, where was I along the way to not notice the 8 things that you've done that make you valuable and should make me want to reward you?
Yeah. Or it can also even feel like, well, you're just trying to save a buck. You're trying to pay me what you've always paid me, knowing now I'm producing more, so there's more for the bottom line. Right?
Oh yeah. So I always think that the conversations are always best coming from the leader because it takes all of the stuff we just talked about out of it.
I love that. Big takeaway. Don't be lazy. I love that. So all right. So that's our first one. I know the second one we hinted on a little bit, and I'll set it up just briefly, is making sure you're placing the right kind of managers in the right context.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, say a little more about that. Add some color.
So there's also, since we were talking about promoting the right people, there's other research that shows that, so now we have, you have in-person work, you have hybrid where it's some in the office, some outside, and then you have people that are fully remote. So the researchers asked a ton of employees, what type of leader do you want based on your work setting? And so they found that for in-person teams, the usual suspects reared their head. It was, people that are charismatic, confident, extroverted, all of that stuff. If there was a virtual team, they could care less about any of those qualities. They just wanted doers. They wanted people that were great at planning, that helped prioritize, that stayed on task, helped other people stay on task, smooth roadblocks, all of that stuff. They didn't want the person that could do the rah-rah, we're all in it together, let's fire up and go. They just wanted people that would help them get stuff done. In fact, it was like close to 90% of them wanted that. That's really good news for people that are task-oriented and like to get things done if you're hoping to get promoted, as long as your leaders kind of see it that way. And I also think it leads to a different point. The whole in-out office, return to work, all of that other kind of stuff has changed most people's perception of what the nature of the workplace is. And so I think that people that have returned to the office still see that environment somewhat differently than they used to if they worked at home. And so I think, I could be wrong, but I think there's a greater focus now on, I may be at the office, but I've got a certain number of tasks to do and I'm going to do those things. And so promoting people that help people get things done is a much better approach than just going for the old standard, wow, friendly, extroverted, outgoing, charismatic, rah-rah. That only goes so far, especially if the person has to work closely with a team. So the key there is just think about what the nature of the team that you have, if you're promoting a leader, think about the kind of work they do, and then think about what that leader should be able to do with those folks. And if it's a distributed workforce, you need somebody that's really good at organizing, planning, prioritizing, helping people get their jobs done.